in the beginning. If you don't understand the beginning, you're never going to understand the end. For as it was then, so it shall be again. The flood in the beginning was the flood of Noah. The flood at the end is the flood of Satan's lies, as it is written in Revelation chapter 12. You've got to have the ark of truth, and you better be on board. You better know our Father's word and understand it. Jacob has just left Laban and with his family, and or is attempting to, and he's going to meet Esau now, his brother, who said, I'm going to kill him. And he's a little anxious about that. I don't like to say he was afraid, but I think he was concerned because he had his little ones, his wives, and all of his children along with him, and being able to protect them against his brother who has threatened to kill him, that's to say Esau. That creates a little bit of a problem. So let's get with him as he said goodbye to Laban. They've come to an agreement of peace and a peaceful parting. Chapter 32, the great book of Genesis, verse 1, and it reads, And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. How can you miss if you have the angel of God right with you? Verse 2, And when Jacob saw them, he said, This is God's host. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim, which is, it says, two hosts or two camps. Why? A camp of angels and a camp of people. God's angels are always with those that serve him. You don't have anything to worry about. Bring it on. God will be with you. You can handle it. You can take care of it. Verse 3, And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, that's Harry, the country of Edom, being read, and so it is to this day. Verse 4, And he commanded them, saying, Thus shall you speak unto my lord Esau. Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now. And of course, Laban was also Esau's uncle, and rightfully so, inasmuch as they are brothers. But he sends this word, and Jacob wasn't Esau's servant. This is why I feel that he was going a little bit overboard. And I can't, Jacob was not a coward. I mean, he wasn't afraid of a whole lot of anything. He knew God was with him. So I have to count it that it was to protect. I mean, he was traveling with young cattle, his own young children, and his whole encampment, which makes you a little bit open to warring or anything of that nature when you have the whole tribe right on, basically you could say, the front line, if you'll allow that. Verse 5. And he continued with verse 5, And I have oxen and asses, flocks, and men servants and women servants, and I have sent to tell my Lord that I may find grace in thy sight. I want to have peace. I want to have love. That's what grace is, basically. 6. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. Now that could be kind of a scary thought. Are these troopers? Is it 400 soldiers? Is it 400 to do harm to his family? I mean, that's a small army. And this would be enough to put you on guard and bring you to attention to know this is time to take care of business. But then at the same time, it could be, when you think it through, it could be that Esau loves his brother after all these years, and he's sending all these people to help him and the little ones travel, to assist them along the way. There's just possibility of conflict coming here. Doesn't look good on one hand, especially by Esau's past, where he said, I'm going to kill him. Verse 7, And then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. And he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks, and herds, and the camels, into 2 bands. Now, I hold it somewhat against him even for this. 8, and said, If Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. We're going to haul out. We're gone. Verse 9, and Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Jacob, of Isaac rather, and the Lord which saidest unto me, return into thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. You see, I want you to stop and think a moment. When he was anxious, when it looked like there could be trouble, who did he turn to? Did he turn to the strength of the arm? No, he did a little planning, but he turned to God. Because God has promised him, I'm with you. And, you know, our opening verse was that the angels of God met him. He doesn't really have anything to worry about, but he still brings God into the equation. You should too. When you have a problem, if you're truly one of God's elect, if you're a servant of the living God, talk to him. Don't be shy. Don't be bashful. Communicate. Communicate, communicate. And next verse, please. We'll go with verse 10. I am not worthy, he speaks to the Father, of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become two bands. I've used a little preparation here. I've divided my company into two bands, and as I said, this concerns me a little bit, the way he did this. Why? 11, deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. For I fear him, lest he will come and smite me and the mother with the children. Now that's why he's afraid, the mother with the children. Jacob's not afraid himself. And we'll prove that before we finish this chapter or the next one. For he'll even wrestle with God himself when God tests him. And God will test him. And his name will end up being changed because of it. Verse 12. And thou saidest, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. I know these little children are supposed to multiply like the sands of the sea. Be with me. Communicate. That's what he's doing a good job. 13. And he lodged there that same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother. He's going to butter him up a little bit. And a wise leader might do this, okay? Verse 14, pretty good sized gift. Listen to it. 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams. Verse 15, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 kine, that's cattle, and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 foals. I mean, that gets to be a pretty good present. 16, and he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by him themselves, and said unto his servants, pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. You spread it out there, so if he takes one, it'll cool him down a little bit, and then he'll be happy about the other. 17, and he commanded the foremost, saying, when Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? How are you going to answer? 18, then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's. Again, Jacob's not his servant, but he's putting this forth in an humble way. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau. And Esau wasn't his lord. Okay, that means master. And behold, also, he is behind us. He's coming right on along. Verse 19, and so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the drove, saying, On this manner shall you speak unto Esau when you find him. This is being a little over careful in my estimation, but then again, I'm going to give Jacob credit, because he is protecting his children that God said would become as numerous as the stars of heaven, sands of the sea. He didn't want them wiped out, and actually he didn't want to die himself. Verse 20, because Esau had said, I'm going to kill him. Verse 20, and say ye, moreover, behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us, for he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face, and peradventure he will accept of me. He'll be happy with me. I'm his brother. Maybe this will buy him. You can't buy friends, number one, but still it is a wise gesture on his part, inasmuch as he is open, because there he has with him, I mean, little kids. He's not ready to face Esau and 400 troopers. Not at all. But there is one great advantage that Jacob has. God's with him. Verse 21. So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. 22. And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok, which Jabbok being the emptying. Why, it would empty into the Jordan where much took place. 23. And he took them and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had, for safety reasons. 24. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. I mean, it was breaking light. We know who this was. It was the angel of the Lord. This documents that Jacob wasn't a coward. He's wrestling with the angel of the Lord, and he doesn't quit. He wrestles all night long. This is why he gets his name, heel grabber or contender, because he is a contender. Up to this point, he's contended with Laban and won. He's contended with Esau and he won. He's bought his birthright. He is a winner all the way around, a contender. And here God, I think, is teaching him a little lesson. Verse 25, and when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched, when the angel of the Lord couldn't get him to give up, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. I feel that what he did from the 4th lumbar, he threw his sciatic nerve out of place. And boy, if you think that won't cripple you up, it'll make you stop. That's pain. And the pain shooting all the way down your leg where you could hardly walk. So the angel was impressed. Jacob just wouldn't quit. Verse 26. And he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. That's what the angel of the Lord said. And he said, I will not let thee go except thou bless me. Old contender and heel grabber is hanging in there for a blessing. See, he knows who he's wrestling with. Else he would not be asking for a blessing. Verse 27, and he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. That's Jacob. I'm the contender. And he had been born with this name, and it had carried him all the way through. Verse 28, and he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with him, and hast prevailed. Now, a lot of people like to translate Israel as the prince that prevailed with God, and well enough, except he didn't win. It is the prince that God chose and named of the people. I mean, he kind of changed his name from contender because he lost. And his name is changed to simply the prince that is with God. And so it is. In other words, you don't want to translate something to say somebody prevailed or overcame God. That doesn't happen. Okay? Not going to happen. But certainly God loved this one and proved him, knew that he wasn't going to give in to the first whim that came along. 29. And Jacob asked him and said, "Tell me, I pray thee, thy name." And he said, "Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name?" Question. And he blessed him there. Jacob knew what his name was. It was the angel of the Lord, which is the presence of Almighty God. But he received the blessing. Verse 30, and Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. It changed him. My soul is in good hands. But Peniel means the face of El, the face of God. I saw it. Verse 31. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. He could hardly walk. But, I mean, there he had wrestled with God all night long. 32, therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. And so it is, and so it was. How precious our Father is, that he bears with us, that he stays with us, that he chose this one. This is the father of the patriarchs. This is the father that will bring forth the 12 tribes of the house of Israel. And his name changed from Jacob to Israel. And so it is that God has his way. I mean, there was a whole host of angels overseeing. Jacob should know, now Israel, that he has nothing to worry about because he's in God's hand. And when you're in God's hand, you can rest assured you're going to have the victory as long as you humble yourself. Don't take credit for God's work. Give the credit all to our Father and be his servant, and you will always be blessed. Never leave God out of the equation. Who did Jacob turn to at his lowest moment there? I mean, 400 men are coming against his family. Turn to our Father. Our Father blessed him, wrestled with him all night. This was a character builder, because to have wrestled with the angel of God all night and have even lived through it when you stop and think about it. But his little old limp as he goes along, I'm sure he rightly deserved, but God approved. But he is no longer contender. He is now the prince that is of God, that will be with God, that sets forth the father of the patriarchs, the house of Israel. Chapter 33, verse 1. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came. There he is. And with him 400 men. And he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the 2 handmaids. And what did he do? Verse 2, and he put the handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. He's kind of playing favorites here. I'm not very high about that, but that's, I guess it's human nature, and I guess that's the way it was. He did not have to worry, nor should he have even considered it, but he was being careful. Verse 3, and he passed over before them, he led the way, and bowed himself to the ground 7 times, that's overdoing it, until he came near to his brother. That is really, that's not my style, but it was his, and maybe God was leading him, but I think it was overdone. Verse 4, and Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. It's obvious Esau had forgiven him. All this fear and anxiety was for naught. That time had healed, and time is a great healer. But the main thing is, don't leave God out of the equation. Jacob might never have been able to change Esau's mind. But don't you ever doubt for a minute God can change the mind of anybody he chooses. That's why when you have somebody that is so stubborn that they're almost insane, all you have to do is pray. God can. I don't know that he will, but God can change them. So don't ever worry about it. God changed Esau from that hate-filled thing that Jacob had robbed him, stolen his birthright. Jacob didn't steal his birthright. He sold it. And Almighty God knew he had sold it. God even kind of led, because he knew Esau, well, he hated Esau from the first earth age. Because he cared not about Almighty God, his heritage or anything else. It would not have done for Esau to have been the head of that nation. So here you have these two that would be the superpower of superpowers, as we learned in chapter 27 in the end times. You have them getting along. Might say perestroika, as they would say in Russia, that superpower and this superpower, one of Jacob or Israel and the other of Esau. And certainly it would still seem, because of the communistic traits of the nation, they still don't care that much about God or their heritage. You can't judge a whole band of people by one particular political party, which communism is, but and a religion as well. But because there are some good Christians in Russia, but basically you have those superpowers, and here they're getting along, which there are times that they do even to this day. But you know, however, if you're a reader of prophecy, and you know God's word is true, and you know things will come to pass, that the reason they warred while they were yet in their mother's womb is they'll always war. And there will be war there, even as it is written in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, and certainly not a good time. But God takes care of that, just like he takes care of everything else. If you have faith, if you trust him, and if you know him, God is a good way to be on a winning team, is to be on God's side. Communicate. But let there be no doubt, even though God hated Esau, as Malachi chapter 1 so stipulates, as Romans chapter 9 so stipulates, before he was ever born, God hated him. But here he has touched him, and he ran, and he kissed his brother. And they wept. They were glad to see each other. Verse 5 to continue. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children, and he said, "Who are these with thee?" And he said, "The children which God hath graciously given thy servant." He's still playing the servant role here, maybe so. 6. Then the handmaidens came near, and they and their children, and they bowed themselves. Verse 7, and Leah also with her children came near, and bowed themselves, and after came Joseph with near, and Rachel, and they bowed themselves, and paying respect and homage to this Esau and his band. Verse 8, and he said, what meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And he said, these are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. Still calling him Lord or Master. Verse 9, and Esau said, I have enough. I've got plenty. My brother, keep that thou hast unto thyself. I don't need it. I've got plenty on my own. I just don't need it. Verse 10, and Jacob said, nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand, for therefore I have seen thy face as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. We're getting along. So I want you to have, it was kind of an insult in this time, especially if you were offered a gift, if you didn't take it. That was a pretty high insult. Verse 11, take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dwelt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. I mean, it was time, and he did. Verse 12, and he said, let us take our journey, and let us go, and I will go before thee. Esau is saying, let me escort you on in. We'll move on out. Jacob is still a little edgy here. He doesn't want to travel with those 400 men with his little ones. He still wants to be independent, wants to be on his own. Verse 13, and he said unto him, my Lord knoweth that the children are tender. They're real young. And the flocks and herds with young are with me. And if men should overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. I would rather not have your help, is what he's saying. I don't want those 400 to be driving my herds and my flock and pushing them. They're young, they're tender, they're weak, is what he's saying, because of age. Verse 14, let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead on softly, slowly, okay, according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children be able to endure, until I come unto my Lord, unto Seir, into this hairy, shaggy place, which is what it means. 15, and Esau said, let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. And he said, what needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. And what Esau, I have no doubt that Esau was saying, look, they know the way. They know where the water is. They know where the trails are. Let me leave you a few guides here to assist you. Jacob wanted no part of it. He wanted his independence, and that's good, because he had someone with him that Esau would not have comprehended, was the living God. Verse 16, so Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. He let it be. He let his brother have his way, and so it was. 17, and Jacob journeyed to Sukkot. Sukkot means booths. Okay. And he built him a house and made booths for his cattle. Therefore, the name of the place is called Sukkot. And just like we'll come across this title again concerning Passover. And so it is, with it meaning the Feast of Booths, as it would later turn into. But here he's beginning to settle. He's settling on his own, and he's looking forward to that time when he will return again to his family, which he has already, his brother, and will be settled there. Verse 18, and Jacob came to Shalem, which is to say safe, a city of Shechem, that means the back, like the backbone, which is in the land of Canaan. When he came from Padamarim, and pitched his tent before the city. In other words, he made that long trip from Laban's all the way across, and now he is situated in the land of Canaan, the land in which his father, this basically he has passed through where he spent the night with the pillar, Bethel, house of God. And how God has blessed him through this. You might say, well, was God picking him as a favorite? Not necessarily. Jacob, or Israel, now called, always had God with him. He communed with God. He worshiped God. He trusted our Father. He obeyed our Father, even though he had a contentious soul. He was a heel grabber. He was going to make sure, but it was all usually for good reasons. And so it is, 19. And he bought a parcel of a field where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And some think it was 100 lambs. Verse 20, to finish the chapter. And he erected there an altar. You understand? See, this is serving God, a place to worship God. And called it El Elohi Israel, which is what? To say, God, the God of Israel. He had wrestled with him. He had communed with him. He had seen him face to face and lived. Here, this one who would bring forth the patriarchs of the house of Israel. What a person. But at the same time, always, never forget, was he any different than anyone? Not really. He was just a man that trusted God and knew as long as God was with him, he could cut it. That gave him the stability and the belief, even within himself, that if God was with him, who could be against him? It's a good way to have and a good way to be.